What's up, everybody? It is your boy, Tim, Mr. Meaningful Work, and welcome to the What is Humanly Possible podcast. I am your host, and I am joined by Prem, CEO, co-founder of Humanly, also joined by Danielle, who is a work futurist, a speaker, and a LinkedIn top voice, and Rajamma, Senior HR Technology Director and an adjunct professor at NYU. How is everybody doing today?
Doing great.
Fantastic.
Awesome, Tim. How about you?
I'm lit up. I just took a sip of coffee, so my blood is starting to heat up and starting to get ready. I'm excited to be chatting with you guys. And for today, we're just getting to know each other. We're just getting comfortable. We're just having conversation. And I hope that's okay with everybody. Is that cool?
Yes,
Right, cool.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So I got a couple questions for you guys. And if you have the answer, feel free to just jump right in. Now, as we look at the title of this podcast, what's humanly possible, right? It kind of speaks to the endless innovation that humans are capable of. So I would like to ask each of you, or whoever wants to answer first, what is one invention or human innovation that consistently impresses you? What comes to mind?
That was a hard one, Tim. I kept thinking about it and I was like, is it the World Wide Web? Is it jet engine? It is air travel? Is it even sliced bread? I mean, what could be the best invention ever? But then I thought, you know what? The computer chip, the thing that is making it possible for us for anything that is modern computing, even the watch on your wrist, that is the greatest invention. I think it was around in 1961. I can't remember the inventors' names. I remember one, Jack Kilby. I can't remember the other one. So excuse my ignorance there. But I think that that was the greatest invention. Imagine kind of having to lug a whole lot of vacuum tubes on your wrist if you want to look at a watch that is digitally powered. So I think that is the best invention. What do the others think?
I love that.
Yeah, I can jump in. I'm all for technology that kind of makes things more accessible to the world. Like it's really, when we think of all the tech that we use today, it's still only, a lot of it is only used by a small portion of the world. And I think things that make internet more accessible, things that make applications bite size, you can put in your phone in your pocket and access any day. As we think about remote work, just infrastructure that makes Wi-Fi speed faster in places that we might want to be working from. So I think anything that brings what is happening on the cutting edge to the rest of the folks that are not on that edge is always important to me. And I think the other piece is just around getting better as a person, like tools like Fitbit, or there's tools like Virtual Sapien that will tell me if I'm making eye contact in a meeting or if I'm not. And I think just things I can do to make myself better. I like those sort of themes as well.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm a big fan of Aura rings. And I'm also a big fan. If you were to ask me what my favorite invention is, I would tell you the fanny pack, because it's just so practical. It really is. I just got a new one. I'm like so excited about it.
How many do you own, Danielle? How many fanny packs do you own?
Actually, I only own one because I tend to buy like cheap ones. And then if I go to like a festival or if I'm traveling, like I know it's just going to get dirty. So I always, just replacing them. So that's okay.
But
I'm
sure there's
bought
like a fanny pack like subreddit group that just like goes all in.
Like here's fanny packs around the world. Like
exactly.
But I bought one that I can wash because I'm trying to be more sustainable. But going back to your question, I'll preface it by saying this is not an ad. But I think that along the lines of actually Prem and Rajamma, I would say my favorite invention is like Otter, being able to transcribe things, because humans learn very differently from one another. Some of us are auditory, visual, what's that, like tangible, what's the one for tactile learners? And I really do believe that I've been born into an age where technology can really help me, not hurt me, to learn in a way that is the best for me. And I think that's also probably why we're going to have like the smartest kids ever in history, because there are ways that we can all learn. And that's okay. And that, like being a visual learner is like a great thing. And there's ways of learning, and there's resources you can look at. So that would be my best invention, is just like new ways of learning.
I love it. What was the app? Is it Otter? Like the animal Otter?
Otter.ai. Yeah. This is not an ad, but they really should pay me.
Yeah.
I love Otter too. I'll chime in there because I think a lot of, and I like, so anytime I'm in a Zoom meeting, I kind of have the role of, you're observing and engaging and conversating. And I think just having some of the like automated notes taken out of the equation, not having to worry about that part of the observational process, letting something else do the observing and for you, it frees you up to like be a human, to actually talk to someone. Right. So, I'm gonna have to
add that to my repertoire. I would say for me, the invention or the innovation that consistently impresses me it's not one thing, but instruments. Like when people think of new ways to deliver music or to express themselves through music is such a universal unifier. It's just crazy. The thing that still gives me chills, I don't know if you guys watched the World Cup, and there was a certain point. I'm Nigerian, so I'm a little bent towards like Afro beats, but there was a certain point where they played this song, "Baby Calm Down," and so it's a very you can hear the intro and "Baby Calm Down," and then like the whole crowd, like literally the whole world is singing this, but the different instruments, you got the drums, you got the keyboard, you got the strings, you got like all these different things, and they continue to innovate. You continue to see like weird and strange instruments that folks come up with. And so that's something that consistently impresses me, but I appreciate everybody sharing. Does anybody here play any instruments, by the way?
I play the veena, which is an Indian instrument. It's like a sitar, but it's laid on the ground and played like that.
Oh my goodness.
It is, yeah.
We might have to have a guest appearance. You might have to play some music on your shows. Rajamma. Real talk. Danielle, do you play anything?
I play my vocal cords.
You sing?
Yeah, I was in an a cappella group for like 6 years.
And you do a cappella? I love a cappella. All we listened to this holiday was pentatonics.
Love them.
And that's, what about you, Prem?
No, I have an auto-tune app on my phone that I use with my kids, but that's about the extent of my musical.
There you go. Get your T-Paid on, man. Auto-tune is the move. That's the move.
Danielle, I'm envious of you. I really envy people who can sing. And that's the reason that I took up music, because I wanted to sing, but people don't want to listen to me sing. So I really had to pick up another instrument. So one of these days I'd love to hear you sing.
Yeah, of course.
I'll sometimes just kind of sing some random like 90s song, like when I'm walking around the house, like some Blink-182 song or something. And it's gotten to the point where my daughter is now like, right when she hears the first note come out of my mouth, she says, stop.
No, Daddy. You should like put her finger right on your lips, like, I love it. Well, next question. So we're on a podcast. We're about to start this journey into what's humanly possible and bring value to folks. How would you rate yourself if we had a rating scale of heavy listener, casual listener, barely, rarely listen, or never? How would you rate your podcast listenership around the room?
I would say I'm a pretty good listener. Some of my favorite podcasts include Brave New Work, Brene Brown's, both of her podcasts, and like Tim Ferriss. I've just been getting into Jay Shetty, so like, oof, that stuff is like really hits home.
Yeah.
And I would say also Call Her Daddy, because that's like, it's the podcast that, I think it's like the most listened to by women. Yeah. So I would say that like I try to tune in every week, but I also go through ebbs and flows of like when I want to listen to podcasts versus music versus watching a Netflix show. And like, it's good not to put pressure on yourself. And it's also great to be like sharing those episodes with friends that really resonate. It's a great way to connect with people, is just send them a podcast episode you think they would like, or that relates to a conversation you recently had.
Now, do you just listen to Jay Shetty or you watch? Because I can't just listen to, like, he needs to be looking in my eyes. As
his dreamy eyes, I know. You and me, Tim.
Yeah.
I usually just listen to him, but that's a good point. Maybe I will start watching him.
Yeah.
I got his book on Audible, and then I fell in love. So there's no going back from Jay Shetty. It's very hard. I am a reasonable listener. I won't say that I'm like, I'm like Danielle. I make choices on what I want to do with any spare time that I have in terms of what I want to listen to. I'm a big Brené Brown, Adam Grant, Simon Sinek fan, and then I also kind of tend to move towards some of the, especially when I'm walking outside. I love walking outside. That's my think time. So having something in my ear is always good, and that's what I do. And I sometimes kind of get into some of the podcasts from don't judge me, but some of the podcasts from Cambridge and Oxford and so on. There's a lot of innovations being done there. So some of the podcasts there, specifically related to science and medicine, I tend to listen to those. So I have a series on that I have a kind of a inclination for.
What about you, Prem?
Yeah, so I'm middle of the road in terms of my frequency. Usually I'll listen to podcasts sometimes when I'm driving, although now without the commute times in this remote world over the last several years, I'm not doing as much driving, but I listen to podcasts when I work out sometimes, just in the background. Brene Brown for sure. This Week in Startups, I with Jason Calacanis and Molly Wood. I just kind of like their voices. So like sometimes I'm like just working out and it's just kind of in the background, but the content's obviously very strong as well. And I'll usually listen to podcasts, if I, maybe I'll see a guest that I am really wanting to hear from, and kind of hear a unique take from, and the hosts are obviously really important. Like I want someone that I can relate to. And I'd love to see more recently, we're seeing a lot more kind of diversity of hosts, and it's not kind of the same type of podcasters. So that's been great to see as well.
Prem, you talked about some things, that you look for. So it could just be the voice, the podcaster's voice. It could be the guests and how you're able to relate to them. It could be the content. For me, what I look for is chemistry, right? If I can hear or see that the guests have this chemistry, and it's funny and it's natural and it's organic, like that leads me to connect with that podcast. Obviously the guests as well. But I want to ask you, like, what makes a good podcast? What keeps you coming back to Brene Brown, or what keeps you coming back to these places? And what makes a sucky podcast? What's a reason that you would not click on a thumbnail, or you would not, listen to something? What makes or breaks a podcast?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. A huge part of it has to do with my ability to relate to the material, but also the hosts. And I think generally right now, I mean, as we're seeing what's happening in social media and stuff, even just from like a buyer behavior standpoint, people make purchasing decisions. A lot of times they're buying based on the people they're engaging with, not necessarily the company. I think the brand is a combination of, you know, individual brands within it. But yeah, I mean, one example is like, I actually didn't know Danielle. I saw her LinkedIn content, not necessarily always in like podcast form, but her posts. And you kind of, as you, without sounding like a stalker, as you follow people, you kind of get a sense like, okay, that's a person that has a similar view on these topics as me. So what I want to listen to is content and material that is contextual to me, but also shared by someone who I wouldn't say has to have a similar views. I mean, by no means. I want to learn from people who have different views from me, but I do think there are some kind of basic ways that content is addressed that I want to get into. Like some people will go to very high level. That's not what I'm into. So I want someone that's like attacking the content or thinking about it at the same kind of level that I am, whether that's high level or low level or whatever it is. It doesn't really matter. It's personal preference, but that's kind of how I think about how I consume. Yeah.
Yeah, I can go next. Similar things. I think, Tim, you call it out, which is I need to see the chemistry between the people that are interacting on that podcast, because that comes out in terms of the reality of stuff that then they can talk about. So it keeps it real. So one of my favorite podcasts have been, like in the recent past, there has been one with Adam Grant, Simon Sinek, and Brené Brown. I mean, that has been like, I could listen to it all day. And the reason is that they, pardon my language here, but basically there's no bullshitting. It's like they keep it real all the time. And you can see that they are interacting. They are bringing out some very important topics and they deal with it right there. And I like to have those. And so when I'm listening to those, then I want to listen to a little bit more of that and, kind of see that then I can relate to it. So I like to have them keep it real during a podcast rather than a documentary, like, what do you think? And here are the 4 facts. And, it becomes, then I can read about it. I don't need 2 people talking about it. So it has to have that element of human element there as I listen to them. So Danielle, what about you?
Oh my gosh, everything is resonating so deeply with me, honestly. My answers have changed a little. I think there's an element so podcasting, I really do think that podcasting is like sort of intimate. It's, it's just like this sit down, let's have an intentional conversation and let's get into the story. Let's get into the meat of it. And I think part of that is, in a great interview, is the interviewer really posing thought-provoking, deep, intentional questions. And not only that, but being able to go a little bit deeper than maybe the person who's answering would have with their own vulnerability. Leading with vulnerability, I think, is the key. Because without that, then you're having someone reveal something about themselves without you doing that first. And I think that's 5149 thing that I like to say about leadership is like, first you have to be vulnerable in order to get someone else to be vulnerable. So I think there's that element of it. And I think also storytelling. I mean, I'm a sucker for a great story. Yeah. And if you can weave, elements of and certain themes into your story throughout the episode that relate, like Prem was saying, like relate to what I'm going through even better. Because those are the things that, get the listeners to latch on until the end. And they really want to see it through. So I think that's part of it for me.
Absolutely. You hit it. I mean, I think what you shared about story is, in my opinion, what makes a great podcast, especially a host's ability to unearth a story versus just rattling off questions and bring out the the storyline, right? Who is the protagonist, right? Who is what was the climax? What was the struggle, and how did you go through that? Is what connects folks to that. And you're right, it is an intimate. You're literally sitting there listening to somebody's conversation, and you have to be able to be intentional about that connection there. So I appreciate that. And we ask these things because, again, we're starting this podcast. We want to make sure that we are doing these things. We want to add as much value to our listeners' lives as they're sitting with us, listening to our conversations with our various guests, making sure that those stories are brought out, making sure that there's that relevancy and that resonation, with folks, that chemistry is built. And part of that chemistry being built, to your point, Danielle, is that vulnerability. How vulnerable are we able to be with each other? So we're actually going to step into that field right now on a little bit of the lighter side, talking about a time. I want you guys to tell us a story, right? Tell us a story about a time where you laughed so hard, either milk came out of your nose or your stomach was hurting, you fell out of your chair, you were crying. Like, we want to hear those times and connect with those times. So does anybody have a story about laughing so hard it became an ab workout?
I'm waiting for someone else to go ahead of me here.
Oh my goodness. I have a couple. I want you guys to go ahead and get started. I mean, all of mine are around my kids, my parents, because these guys are constant. I'll start with mine. So it was over, I think it was Thanksgiving. My mom had shared something that my dad had done. They were talking, and so my mom was sharing with my dad how she appreciates how flexible and how broad he is by way of different things that he's able to do. Right now, he's working as a chaplain in a hospital. Previous to that, he was a pastor. He's done professorship and things like that as well. So she was just affirming that like, I appreciate that you have such a broad knowledge about different things. And so then he then went on to tell her, was like, I appreciate that. And he's a Nigerian man. She's like, I appreciate that. And I'm also a programmer. And my mom was like, programmer? It's like, yeah, like, I don't, some people understand, Python and Java and things like that. Me, I don't understand how to code snakes or code coffee, but I know how to do like funeral programs or wedding programs. You start off the script with an opening prayer, and then you move on to this. You move on. And he was straight faced like the whole time talking about his programming skills while mom is affirming his bra. Like, I was on the floor. My kids came over to make sure that I was okay because I was crying at the idea of my dad being a programmer talking about funeral programs and wedding programs. So that is mine. What is your story about laughing so hard?
I'll go next, but it has to have the context. So I'll give you a little bit of the context, and it's also again about my parents. So, imagine about in 80s and 70s, 80s in India, and I grew up there, and I come from a very middle class family with my parents kind of working hard, educated, but like kind of making ends meet and trying to raise a family. And so my dad bought his first vehicle. So if you have seen the scooters, the two-wheelers in India, or, you've seen pictures of them, or you've seen them in Italy, the Vespas and the Lambrettas and so on. So my dad bought his first Lambretta. And so it was a big deal in our house, like, the first vehicle in the family, and, we're not traveling by public transport. So my dad used to kind of polish it every night, like, the mirrors used to gleam, and then he used to kind of ride the bike. Anytime, and so he used to, both my parents worked. So my mom, he used to pick up my mom from work and come back in the evening. Mostly they'll be back around 6:30, and we'll all be at home by then, like back from school and all of that. And so one day they haven't turned up for almost 2.5 hours. Like, it was like 6, 7, 8, and we were all worried. My dad is not the greatest, driver of anything. So we were worried that they had gotten themselves into an accident. We didn't have cell phones back then, so we couldn't call them to find out what was going on. So they show up about around 9 o'clock in the night, and we were like ready to call the police and all of that stuff, the kids, and so they show up around 9 o'clock, and they both like walk in very sheepishly. So we asked them what went in. So my dad, anytime there was like a little different sound in his scooter, he would stop the scooter and like examine it. So he stopped somewhere. The scooter made a little different noise than he had ever heard, and so he stopped the scooter. My mom got up from the pillion seat, so she got up from the back seat. My dad got back on and drove. And my mom is like left behind, and she's like waving her arms, she's screaming at him, you idiot, stop the scooter. But he is just driving away. And so he's like still talking to my mom in the back. And so he stops at a signal and he's talking. So the people around him are like thinking, what kind of an idiot this guy is, like, and not like days like this when people are, talking into their headphones, like you can literally see him talking. And so then he suddenly realizes the scooter is slightly light. So he looks back and there is no mom. So then he's like, he doesn't know where he dropped her. So now he's afraid that he dropped her somewhere and she is run over by a bus. So he stopped the scooter, turns around, and we were in Delhi. My dad couldn't speak the language in Delhi. So he gets in his auto, I've seen the 3-wheelers in India. So he hires one, and he tells the guy in like whatever broken Hindi he has, like something fell off. So this guy is like looking for a box or a suitcase or a bag, and he's looking, there is nothing fell off. Then my mom is like, she didn't have the money because she had put her purse in front of the scooter. So she didn't have anything. And she's like walking home, like huffing and puffing and cursing him, And so he finds her on the sidewalk, walking and puffing and huffing. And then, and he tells the auto guy, stop. Whatever fell off is like walking there. And so this guy says, you mean this fell off and you didn't know? Like my mom is like a little big brain. So it was just so funny. So she got back on, and then they came home like 3 hours later than they should. And so till this day, the whole family, when we get together, we still roll on the floor when thinking of my dad, like, telling the auto guy like something fell off. So that's a joke from our family. So this is the funny story.
Oh my gosh. He dropped the package.
Unreal.
And kept on talking to it. That's something you see like in comedy movies. Like
Yeah, exactly.
that
Literally.
is made for TV.
Yeah, it is.
Oh,
Unreal.
that's good. You got one, Danielle?
I do. It's not about my family. It's about a stranger. And it happened about a month ago. I was traveling to Miami for Art Basel with my friend Gigi, and we were in the airport, and essentially like I had gotten there a little bit like before because to the gate because I had TSA pre-check and clear. This is still not an ad. And I get to the gate and I'm sitting there, and she comes about 15 minutes later and she finds me, and I'm sitting sort of like the closest chair to the kiosk by the gate, and she's sitting next to me. And so we're sitting there and we're kind of just like, gabbing, we're sipping on our matcha lattes, and we're just getting excited for the trip, and nothing's happened yet, right? Like this is like the beginning of the trip. And suddenly out of nowhere, we just hear this like that, like loud. And I kind of like felt the vibration on my feet of like something falling. I was like, what was that? And I look to my right at the kiosk, and there's a child like strapped to a piece of luggage, like tied to it, and he's just like on the floor. And he's just like looking around like, what just happened? Like not crying, not anything, just like on the floor. And we're like, me and Gigi look at each other and we're like, why is he tied to a luggage? Why is no one holding this like 2-year-old child?
Is he like upside down like a turtle on its back? Like just
like a turtle on its back. Like the piece of luggage is like on top of him, but it's like it doesn't look heavy. Like he's suffocating. But and we're just like, did that just happen? And then there's like the delayed reaction of like him starting to cry. And all of, like then the mom, I guess, starts to come around and she like lifts the luggage up and like unties the child from the luggage. And we're like, why was he tied to the luggage in the first place? And that was the beginning of our trip to Miami.
That's how it starts. Yo, the things that parents do for just a second is like, just stay with the bags. Just
hold the handle so he doesn't like treat it like a jungle gym, which he did, and then he fell.
There is things now with that is attached to the luggage. I mean, people with like small children, you might know that you can actually have a seat attached to your bag that kids can sit. I noticed it just this last week when I was traveling. Like there was this kid just sitting on it happily, and the parents were pushing them through the Dubai airport.
This was not that. This
was like a makeshift version.
Oh my God.
like the prototype that failed in production.
Yeah. Someone needs to get her a new one. Yeah, for sure.
I love it. Well, way to kick off the weekend, right? Way to kick off the trip.
And it was a spooky trip. I mean, we didn't stop laughing the whole weekend. So it really set the tone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. You got one first, Prem?
Yeah, well, one thing I will say, so when I was, I think, probably 4, my brother was like 2, so we went on a trip to India, international travel, so through a bunch of airports, and my mom used to have us on these leashes, which I think are maybe, I've now seen a few of them, but yeah, it was quite, it was a little different, but nothing like the turtle on its back, like Danielle's story. Let's see. So funny story. Yeah. So this is right as kind of COVID hit, beginning of 2020, everything was going remote. We were just fundraising for Humanly's first fundraising round, and everything was remote. So I kind of thought I was going to be going in person to meet with investors, and I was actually happy that it was remote. I could do more meetings, and so, but my house wasn't really, my internet wasn't the fastest. I wasn't really set up for remote work. So I was about to pitch an investor, and my internet was super slow. I was like going through my slides, and they were, and of course I don't have them downloaded. They're all on Google Slides and not loading, and so I'm like, what do I do? So I had to go to the fastest place in my house with internet, which is the laundry room. So I set up on the dryer and I'm presenting, and all of a sudden I hear that like ding-a-ling sound that the dryer kind of makes before load. I'm like panicking a little bit, and I'm like pressing buttons on the dryer. I actually literally accidentally started it. So my laptop starts shaking as I'm presenting, and I had to basically just say, hey, I need a quick break. And he did not end up investing in Humanly, but I don't know if it had anything to do with that. But yeah, that's my funny one.
That's a real funny one.
Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate you sharing. I appreciate the affordability, the good times, the laughs, and we're hoping, our goal is that this podcast, the engagements, the guests that we interact with, the content that we share, the stories that are unearthed, will really help to elevate folks' thinking on the different topics that we have. And we'll discuss that a little bit more as we go through, as it relates to human capital and diversity and workforce management and talent development and all these different areas that we want to touch on. But we thank you so much. You'll be hearing from us again soon. Thank you, Prem. Thank you, Danielle. Thank you, Rajamma. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate everyone here, and you guys have a good rest of your day. We'll see you on the next episode. Peace.